Hey everybody, this is Nels. Welcome to today's stream. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to cover topics in product management interviews and resumes. Just a few little scratching the surface bits of things that people have asked me over the years, like how to make it look like you know some PM skills even if you've never been a PM, and how to answer interview questions about those skills. So I'll give you a little bit of a story about all of that stuff, and we're starting right now. So the first thing I want to say is, the reality of product management is getting product management jobs is hard. There is a lot more people that want it. It's such a great thing to do. It's a great job, and there's all kinds of reasons to want to be a product manager. But there aren't that many jobs. There's roughly 10 times as many developer jobs as there are product manager jobs, and probably 20 to 40 times as many salesperson jobs, to be honest, as there are product manager jobs. So there's a lot of competition. And so you need to have your game well adapted, and you also need to just recognize that there's a lot of competition. And we all know, of course, getting into your first product management job is really challenging. It's hard to get experience to become a product manager. It's hard to get into a new company as a product manager, having never been a product manager. And that's why we often talk about lateral moves, such as I think sales engineer is a great place to move into product management from. And a lot of people, of course, move into product management from engineering. And so that's a pretty common move as well. But the point is that it is pretty challenging to get a product management job. And so I'm going to give you some tips, but they're certainly not going to guarantee that you get a job. So one of the first questions that people always ask me is, I'm not a product manager, but I'd like to become one. So the real question is, how do I turn what I've already done into a story about me having some product management skills? And so the way that you do this, or the way that I recommend doing it, is to think about this basic structure of product management, which I've talked about before. I have several videos and things about this structure. But basically, what we do as product managers is we find problems in the market, we find market problems, we build a solution to those problems using other people, right? We work with a development team or somebody like that, and designers and so on, to create a solution to those problems. And then we take that solution to market, or we help take it to market, again, through other people. This is sales and marketing who do this. So product managers we are the primary responsibility for finding the market problems and defining what problems our solution should solve. We define what the solution should do in terms of the type of problem it solves, although the development team and the designers figure out how it should do it. And then we help with the sales and marketing team to take things to market. Now, I've done a lot of videos and podcasts about going to market and working on building the solution and on finding market problems. So you can find more details on all of those things in the show notes, and of course in my back catalog of videos and things like that. But anyway, the point is that's what we do. And so if you've never been a product manager, how do you go about telling that story? Well, the fact is that a lot of times you have done things that are sort of like that, even if you haven't specifically been a product manager. So for example, this is an example from a real resume. I coached this person. He was thinking of getting into product management. He ended up not. But I thought it was a really good example of a way to tell a story about doing product manager-like things, even though it wasn't in the context of being a product manager. So he won this award in his school. He was an industrial design major. He won this award for this design challenge. And so what he did was he redesigned this packaging, and he worked with somebody on a team to create the new packaging, to test it to make sure it worked, and to create machines to fulfill it. So that's what it said on his resume. This is literally from his resume. Now, if you know this person, you might know who it was. You probably don't. But this was literally from a person's resume. And as we went through, I asked him a bunch of questions, and as we went through, we found out what he actually did. Well, what he did was not just what it said on the resume, because he actually had to do a lot of other product manager type things in order to win that challenge. So first of all, he did have to do some market research. He had to find out what the problem with the current packaging approach was, what the challenges were, what needed to be solved. And he did this by interviewing stakeholders from the company, from the sponsoring company, and also users of the packaging. And so that's just like what we do as product managers. We go out into the market and we try to find those market problems. So he went to a few people. Obviously, he didn't go to a full market, but he did do some problem discovery. So that's a product management type thing. And so he can talk about that when he does an interview and somebody says, well, tell me about why you should be a product manager. And he can say, well, I've gone out and found market problems. What about the next piece? Building things. Well, it was a team of two. So he was one of the team members. He was the leader of the team. And they developed this new packaging approach. And so he worked with someone. He led a team. And that's kind of like that middle part of building a solution, right? It's a little more hands-on than we often are as product managers. But sometimes when you're a little team, and particularly if you've come from an engineering background, you might actually do a little bit of participation like that. Or if you're a designer, you might do some design work. I don't do those things, but I typically work on teams that have lots of developers and designers. So, and you wouldn't want me to do those things anyway. I'm not that good at that. I'm good at finding the problems. That's my role. And then of course, he did have to pitch his design to the challenge committee, and he had to show that it would work and it would be better and superior to the existing solution. And so that's really a kind of a go-to-market activity. Now, is this really product management? Not exactly. But does it have a lot of things in common with product management? Yes, it does. And I think that you will find that in a lot of projects that you might do as a non-product manager, now this was as a student he did this project, but you might find other projects that you might be on other projects where you have to do some similar things. You have to go out and find some problems. You have to influence a team to do something. You might be working in a nonprofit and you might need to be finding out what are the issues that are facing, the clientele of your nonprofit or the people that take your nonprofit's work out to market, so to speak. And you need to find out what those issues are. I talked with another client who exactly did that. He was a developer for a nonprofit. He developed software, but he had to go talk to all the stakeholders in the nonprofit to find out what were the problems with their software that they used for working with their members. And so he did that discovery. That's very much of a product management activity. He then developed the solution himself, which is not a product management activity exactly. And then he had to go pitch it to all the members. And so he went on a road trip and he pitched why this solution was better than the previous solution and got people onboarded with it. So that was very much of a product management type of activity, even though that wasn't his title and it wasn't really considered product management at the time. So the point is that you often, even if you haven't been a product manager so far, you probably have some stories that can align with product management. And that's what I'm recommending that you figure out. And you go analyze your resume to find these little stories that might just be like the bullet here, the bullet I have here, first place winner, redesigned shipping packaging. Well, there's probably product management in there somewhere, or some of the activities that you do as a product manager. So that's what I'm recommending you check out. So that is that story. So that's the number one piece of advice I give to people who are thinking about getting into product management or want to strengthen their resume. This also is true if you've already been a product manager and but you maybe haven't done it very long and you aren't telling your story very well in your resume, right? A lot of resumes, they essentially list out the responsibilities of a product manager instead of telling stories about what they accomplished as the product manager. So let's talk a little bit about actually the story part of being a product manager. So the way that I like to think about your resume, so now we're moving on to the resume. So that was figuring out what my story might be. Now let's talk about how you might tell that story. And the basic thing I think about is that every bullet on your resume should be about a story that you can tell. So when you hand your resume to an interviewer, they should be able to look at any bullet and say, well, tell me more about this bullet, and you should have a story about it. There's other ways that you can get into the questions, and we'll get into that in a minute. But one way is to lead into that is the bullets. And so you want the bullets to be encapsulating some kind of a story. Now, what is a story? The simplest structure of a story, and I have a lot of videos about this, is that there was a problem, you came up with a solution to it, and the solution resulted in good things. So there's all kinds of examples of this, but maybe I tell a story that I did. The problem was sales wasn't making quota, and the sales engineers thought that was because our demo didn't talk about Agile enough. And I went and looked at the way that they were demoing, and I realized that the problem was the demo didn't talk about the prospect's problems and how we solve it enough. In other words, it wasn't about the prospect, it was about us. So we changed that, and the results were that we started making quota every quarter. The company grew. The VP of sales engineering said we totally changed the way we demo because of you. So that's a story that I tell about myself, how I improved their demo. That's just a good story, but it's got a problem. The problem was we weren't making sales. It's got a solution. I helped them fix the demo, and I gave them some new ideas about how to demo, and it had results. We started making quota, and I got a nice recommendation from the VP of sales engineering. So this is what you want your bullets to, all of your bullets to embody. And of course, you need to be able to tell those stories as well. Now, I recommend that you figure out what your stories are. Figure out your best story. This is a story you probably like to tell best about your previous job, and put it into this structure of problem, solution, results. And as I said, I have a lot of videos about how to make a story like that really, really strong. And I recommend you go take a look at those. And I'll put some links in the show notes about how to make your stories really strong. But that's the way to think about it. Your bullets are meant to encompass stories. Start with one. Start with your favorite one, and work on that one. Write it down, practice it so you can easily bring it up when it comes time to do the interviewing. And so I mentioned that people might ask you about the bullet points on your resume, but they also might ask you other kinds of questions like, tell me about a time. So there's a lot of tell me about a time questions, like tell me about a time you were creative, or you made the wrong decision, or you showed initiative. I've got some examples here. One of the nice things about when you work on these stories is they actually often show multiple different aspects of your behavior and your personality, right? So my story about helping fix the demo, I can use that for tell me about a time you were creative, tell me about a time you took the initiative. I took the initiative to help the sales engineers change the way that they did their demo, as opposed to just telling them how to be agile. I have other stories about making the wrong decision. The demo story doesn't fit for making the wrong decision, but I do have other stories about that. And so on. So you want a few stories that are going to answer some of these typical kinds of questions that come up. There are some sites that have really good examples of these types of product management questions, and you can take a look at those. I will try to remember to put one of those in the show notes as well, in the video notes, because it's really useful to sort of know in advance what those questions might be. And so what I recommend in terms of answering those, in addition to having all your stories prepped, is to go through some of those sites, look at all the questions, and then answer them out loud. And make sure you have some kind of a story for all the different types of questions that might come up. So, as I said, one story can fulfill many roles, but you really should have a lot of stories. Aim for 5, and you should have 5 stories in your background. Maybe if you're a new college graduate, you might not yet have 5 stories. But if you've been working at all, and if you've been ambitious and you've gotten some stuff done, you should have some stories to tell. And I recommend using this structure, problem, solution, results, to create and practice these stories. And again, this is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how to tell stories, because one of the key things you need to do with your stories is you need to make them really emotionally resonant, not just state facts. And you can look at some of my other videos on storytelling to learn how to do that. I also have and I'll put a link to it in the show notes here. I have a new cheat sheet that actually guides you through how to tell customer success stories, but many of the practices for telling your own stories are similar. You want to ask questions about what bad thing would have happened if you hadn't solved the problem. What bad thing was going to happen to whoever's job it was if that problem hadn't gotten solved, or would the company have gone out of business, right? So if you, for example, in my Agile story, I told it very briefly, but I often start with the phrase, our sales were tanking, because that's kind of an emotionally grabby phrase to use. And you want to learn how to find and use these emotionally grabby phrases in your stories, because that will make them more engaging and make the interviewer sit up and want to ask more and want to learn more and be impressed that you achieved such great things. You want to do the same thing for the results as well. Okay, so one story can fill many roles. You should have more. Finally, let's talk about how to use these stories back on your resume. So I mentioned that every bullet on your resume should have a story behind it. And of course, you might not be able to do that all at once, but get started on it. And the way that we typically do this, the recommended way of formatting your bullets in this case, is where your story has something like problem, solution, results. Your bullets would be more like results by story. So I achieved some results by solution. So your bullet might be something like, I turned around the losing sales and we started making making quota every quarter by updating the way that we demoed to prospects. Something like that. I probably would word it a little bit better than that. I'm sort of doing that off the cuff. But the point is it's results by solution. And of course you want to do some wordsmithing on that. You'll have to do a little bit of manipulating of that to make it a good sounding bullet and to make it compelling and things like that. But the point is that, and I think it's interesting that the image I found for resumes has James Bond on it, who shot actual bullets. They're not bullet points, they're actual bullets. That's kind of funny. So this was just been a little bit, let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm the author of this book called The Secret Product Manager Handbook. You can get it on Kindle and Amazon. There's links down below. There's a lot of other material on this channel and on my podcast, which is called All the Responsibility, None of the Authority. Please check it out. The most recent 2 articles or 2 podcast episodes are about go-to-market and very valuable stuff that a lot of product managers don't really understand about go-to-market. So I highly recommend taking a look at those. There is a link to the first of the 2 most recent episodes in the show notes, and you can check that out. And you can follow me on Twitter and things like that. I've really just been scratching the surface tonight on things you can do about your resume and interviewing. Let me check to see if anybody's on asking questions. Doesn't look like it. So let me know if you take a look. If you do watch this video and you like it, let me know. And I would love to do more about this topic, resumes and interviewing and finding a job as a product manager. As I say, it's pretty hard to find a job as a product manager, especially if you aren't one already. But, there's things you can do and things you can prepare yourself for and ways you can get into it as well. So all those things, let me know in the show notes and whatnot, or let me know in the comments if you find this interesting, and I respond to my comments right away. And that is it for today's episode, and hope you found this useful. Bye-bye. Oh, and before I go, don't forget to check out some of my other videos.